Good morning, everybody. So this was like the perfect week because we got to skip Wednesday and go right ahead to Friday. It's like if you hear me talk, you will hear me that you will find out very quickly that I despise Wednesdays. Wednesdays are my least favorite day of the week. And everybody's like, what about Mondays? Mondays are really bad. So Monday you're coming back from break, all right, and you're already pretty rested, and so you're ready to go. Wednesdays is like right in the middle. You've gone through already 2 days of work, and then you got 2 more days of work. It's the furthest point between two weekends is basically the way I describe Wednesdays. So I hate Wednesdays, and so we got to skip Wednesday for this class. Now, I do want to talk about that because that actually is going to be relevant moving forward. The plan for last Wednesday was that we were going to start our NetSuite assignment. And I got a very nice but very distressing email from Oracle saying, we are currently behind in provisioning NetSuite accounts. We have no timeline. So basically, we're indefinitely delayed. That may create some problems given that about a quarter of our course is dedicated to doing NetSuite. So we will meet on Wednesday. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we will actually be doing NetSuite in this class. If we do not do NetSuite, probably what I will do is we'll explore some other technology. I think I'm going to try to align it to what we're talking about. So we may do some work in Visio. And I will tell you right now, I don't know very much about Visio already. So it's going to be very, very simple work. But that's going to be my substitute. I hope that we don't do that because I've got the plan for doing NetSuite moving forward. But unfortunately, I don't have the ability to cancel every Wednesday class as much as I might like to. I think that might kind of my boss might get a little bit upset of that. So you're doing 2 hours instead of 3 hours. I said, well, we're going to NetSuite. We decided not to. So that's the plan moving forward. I'll try to work something together. Visio is probably not going to be all that exciting, but some of the other technologies that we could actually look at, especially the machine learning technologies, AI, things like that, those would be a little bit more interesting. So that's the plan if we don't get NetSuite worked out. I would like to get NetSuite worked out if at all possible. Today, we're going to start our Excel work. So if you have not already, please make sure that you go to Brightspace. This is where all the example data sets are. I will be updating these because these are old data sets and some of the information is a little bit dated. Like, for example, if you downloaded the old data set, this actually used to say fall 2022 when I originally created the file. So I'm going to be updating those to be a little bit more modern. But you can kind of see what the data sets look like if you're interested, but I will update those on the day of to try to make sure that those are current. But what you need to do is download those and then open the file, and we're going to go through some very basic tasks. Now, I know that you all have had BSAD 153. Many of you are very well versed in Excel, maybe well beyond what that course is. Some of the stuff may seem really, really easy. Some of the stuff that I'm going to teach you, you may not have used before. Keep in mind that I have to work with a common denominator. I have to operate at assuming that everybody is working at kind of maybe intermediate, maybe a little bit below intermediate in this course. So if the work that I'm doing is just too simple for you, I sincerely apologize. I would love to work at really high order stuff. I'd love to do work in macros and do some analysis like that. But we have to learn to walk before we can run. So we're going to do some very, very basic stuff. We're going to introduce some functions that you may or may not be familiar with. That's because I'm assuming most of the class is going to be catching up on some of these things. So if you know what I'm talking about, great. That means that these tasks will be easy for you. And more importantly, the questions I ask on the exams will be very easy for you. If you're not, then you might want to take notes. Also, as a clarification for this, there is no submission due for these the Excel work. This is all in-class work for your benefit. I will ask test questions on them, so you may want to save your files to make sure that you know what we're doing and what the work that we've done. You may also want to take notes if there's something you particularly don't understand. But I am not grading you on any of these Excel work. Again, this is entirely for your benefit to actually improve your ability and your work. I will talk through some things. If there's something I do that I'm working through and you're like, I don't remember how you did that. Like I do some things without thinking about that. Like one thing I tend to do a lot is I tend to use control key shortcuts. And so if I do something, you're like, wait a minute, how did you just do that? Stop me, say, Dr. Barnes, can you explain what you just did? And that may be a learning experience for everybody. All right. So don't be afraid to interrupt me if you have any questions. All right, so to start out, we're going to do a fairly basic data set today. This is our first data set. As you can see here, I've got a class list. This looks very similar to the class list that I get whenever I start up a new semester. This is what your class list looks like. Obviously, the banner IDs are different because I'm not going to post actual banner IDs in class. The names are a little bit different. These are actually all the accounting instructors. I don't know everybody's middle name, so I just added Harry Potter names, okay? And so one of my students last semester said I called somebody Voldemort, and that was really unfair, but it was Dr. Caden I called Voldemort, so I think that's completely fair, all right? And if you know Dr. Caden, you know why that's fair, all right? No, that's fair. I will say that these are actual emails for the instructors. So YouTube is a little bit dicey when it sees names and emails and it says that's cyberbullying. I actually got called out for it. This is public information. It's actually available on the training website. So it's not like I'm posting emails and trying to say, hey, send a whole lot of emails to these people. I want to call this out saying these are actually publicly available emails for these specific individuals, albeit different middle names, obviously. So I will try to be careful that I don't post any emails. The reason this comes up is when we did NetSuite last year, the sign-in for NetSuite is an email, but it's a fake email. And so that's the YouTube said, saw student names that because I posted the student names and the logins that they had to use. And they said, you are cyberbullying your students. And, you know, there were a lot of jokes about that in my evaluations last year, which I had to explain to my bosses. It's like, no, I'm not a cyberbully. Okay, it's all a terrible misunderstanding of YouTube. But yeah, so some information. This is my class, and I want to actually take some of this information and put it into a context that I can use. And this is what I do for my grade books that I set up. So you will notice that I've got a couple of tabs. We'll talk about the second tab shortly, but let's click over the first tab. I've got my banner IDs, but I don't have my names. So we're going to do something very, very basic to start out with, and we're just going to transfer information. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can do this. And one thing that you will hear me say a lot is there's no golden rule for Excel. Whatever I do, you can find different ways to approach it. And if you're more comfortable with a different method that you already use frequently, that is fine. You may want to note if there's something particularly complex that I may ask you a question about how to do it. And usually I'm looking for a specific path, but there's multiple paths to pretty much any problem. So what I'm going to do is I want to take this information. I want to take these student names because they're all sequential and I just want to copy it over. All right. So the first thing to get used to is when you copy information, kind of the starting point whenever you Excel is you're going to go and you're going to find out the copy button, which is right up here. They've also got cut and they've got paste. All right. You will be doing a lot of that in Excel and other programs as well. So it behooves you to learn the different methods for approaching this. So this is the first one. You can also do right clicking and you can find copy and paste in the right click up here. So copy, paste, and also paste options, which can be very useful. We'll talk about that here in just a second. And then kind of the default, the one that you should know is you should know your shortcuts. So this is one you probably learned in 153. But what is the shortcut key for copy? Does anybody know? Control C, okay? So the golden trinity for Excel is Control C, Control X, Control V, all right? Control C is copy, Control X is cut, Control V is paste. Now, there are a lot of other shortcuts that you can make use of, but those are going to be the ones that you should probably know because you use those frequently. So let's just Control C that, and I'm going to Control V it over into this spreadsheet right here. Now, you will notice that when you do that, there's a bit of a problem. I've got different fonts. I've got different formatting here. This actually just retained everything from the previous class list, which is a little bit awkward because I don't necessarily want to do that. I'm going to clean that up. So let's just go ahead and let's undo that. Let's click undo. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to copy it over, but I just want to copy the values over. I don't want to copy the formatting. So instead, we're going to right click and you'll notice we have all these paste options up here. Okay. Now, the first one is the default paste option will just paste everything that you copy and just paste them naturally over. We just want the value. So let's just go ahead and click on the paste values and you'll notice that it comes over now the way it's formatted. Now, again, simple stuff that we're starting out with here. This will actually become very, very relevant as we start talking about how we paste values when we're actually utilizing formulas or how we can paste formulas over that actually bypass the value. But again, starting out straightforward, small. So now we actually have this formatted and we're in good shape. And we've got a grade book table here. So let's just go ahead and let's change the tab name to grade book. And there's a couple ways you can change the tab name. You can double click down here on sheet 1. You can right click and say rename, whatever floats your boat. But we're just going to call this grade book. All right. I want to set this up and I want us to do some things. I want to format it. I want to get some automatic calculations going. So let's just go ahead and do that. The first one's subtotal. Now, again, this is easy, but I promise you that it will build from here, which is why I'm starting out the straightforward point. I've got 3 homework assignments and I want to get a subtotal of that. So what I could do is I could say equals D2 plus E2 plus F2. But there's a problem with that is if I add new cells, it will not encompass those new cells. So what is one of the very first formulas you probably learned that will actually handle this function a little bit easier? Sum, okay, the sum function equals sum. And then we're just going to highlight all of these right here and add them together. All right, so by the way, I want to talk about a real quick shortcut that will save you an infinite amount of time. You will notice when I did the sum function, so I'm just going to go back. When I did the sum function, you have to open your parentheses. And normally what people do is they drag their mouse across here and they highlight those. But when I was doing it, all I did is I used my arrow key and then I actually picked up everything there. So how did I do that? Does anybody know? Yeah, hold down the control key while using arrows. So like basically I highlight D, hold down control, or I think shift. Yeah, shift. My apologies. Sorry, shift. And shift and control do the same, do similar things, in different circumstances. This one is shift. So I'm going to actually go to D2, hold down shift. I'm going to highlight all those. Now the control key can actually be useful if I wanted to say control and I wanted to go move across. I can also control key if I want to select out diverse numbers, diverse areas. I can hold the control key down. But in this situation, I just want that array. So I'm going to hold down shift and go across all three, which can be very useful. So now we actually have a subtotal for this right here. And the good news is one of the best things about Excel is that we can actually use this formula in multiple areas. So I can actually copy this formula and it will actually adapt for the next input. So instead of saying it's going to add a D2 and F2 together, it will say D3, E3 and F3. Does anybody know what that concept is referred to as? What was that called? What is that called? You heard the term relative cell references? So relative cell references basically means that Excel is going to say, if it's D2 here and I go down one row, I'm going to change all instances of row 2 to row 3. Similarly, if I move over to the right or the left, I'm going to change the column references to the next letter. The relative cell references are both a blessing and a curse. They're a blessing in situations like this where we want to copy information and we want to copy a formula but don't want to change the formula for every row. They're a curse when we want to retain the same formula for every set of cells. But we'll get to that, I promise. We have ways of changing from relative to absolute cell references that makes our lives much easier. Also, I could copy here. I could say Control C, and then I could highlight all this. And by the way I just highlighted was exactly the same way I did before, holding the Shift key and then hitting the down arrow. But I could copy this here, have that all listed here. There's also something where I could do if there's a little black box down here. If I double click on that, it will do it for me. Does anybody know what that's called? Flash fill. Yeah, it's flash fill or autofill, whichever you want to call it. But flash fill, autofill, which again, if you've got a big long list of items and you don't want to just say Control C, down, you just want to flash fill everything, it can be very useful. Please note that flash fill does not work unless there is data in the column immediately to the left of it. Or if you're doing a flash fill across, then it has to be data immediately up to the top. So you do have to do that. If I had a gap right here, and I tried to flash fill, I don't believe it'll work. It may recognize the data. Oh, it did work because it has data to the side. I misspoke. It has to have the data immediately to the side of it. So let's try that again. I'll make sure that I'm not misspeaking. Yeah, see, it won't work because it doesn't recognize the data breadth according to that. So that's what you have to be very careful of. So you have to have data immediately to the left or to the right of it. All right, so that's our subtotal. And then we want to do a total, and we're just going to do something very simple here. We're just going to say equals G plus H, add those together. Now, again, we could do a sum formula here, and it's probably more efficient to do that, but let's just mix it up a little bit. Why not? So a very simple gradebook table. I think we got something pretty basic here. And one thing that I'm very, very insistent on when I talk about Excel is I'm insistent about formatting. Something that you're going to be doing is you're going to be creating a lot of Excel files in the real world when you go out to work into business. Some of you may already have done that at internships. And if I submitted something like this to my boss, they probably would be a little bit disappointed because they didn't take the time to actually make it look nice. And the Excel tools are very, very easy to do it. So we're just going to do some very basic formatting for this to make it look better. And I encourage you all, when you're working in Excel in any other class, that you take the time to do this. It doesn't take a lot of time, but it makes things look infinitely better. So let's just go ahead and let's highlight our top row and let's make this bold. Okay, you can actually go up here. There's the bold settings and italicize and underline settings, but there's shortcuts for this. What is a shortcut for bold? Yeah, Control B for bold. Okay. And if I want to italicize, it's Control I because I italicize, and underline is Control U. I love it when they make things simple. You know, and I love it when things that unfortunately not everything is that simple. Let's go ahead and also center this. I know there's a shortcut for centering, but I tend to just use that. The center and the click. And if you know the shortcut for centering, you can do that. That's fine. Let's also Let's go ahead and fix the width of these columns right here, because the width currently is what the Excel default is. And some of my columns do not have enough width. You see that last name and first name are getting cut off, whereas we need to have more width than we need for the other ones. So there's a couple ways to go about this. You could just go ahead and go to each column and you could double click here, and it would expand out those manually. But that's a lot of work. So let's go ahead and see if we can do this in one fell swoop. Now there's a couple approaches to this. Probably the more complicated one is just highlight all the columns and then double click on the column and it will fix that. So the way I prefer, and this is just kind of the general fix, doesn't always work, but it does in most situations, is to click on this thing called the keystone, where it actually highlights the entire sheet. And then we're just going to double click on one of the column borders and fix it that way. So that's pretty nice. That's a pretty straightforward process. Also, I'm going to do one more thing because we're going to change this, but I do like to delineate whenever I have manual inputs versus automated inputs. So you'll notice over here, these are manual input numbers. These are calculations. These are things that Excel does. So I'm just going to go ahead and highlight these two right here. And I'm going to go ahead and add a highlight to them. By the way, you'll notice that I highlighted one and then I immediately went over to the other and I was able to highlight both. That was, again, the control trick. That's when I highlight something with a mouse. And if I want to move over to an array, I hold down control and then highlight the same thing with the mouse. That's how you can highlight different arrays. And you can do that in many different ways. You can just go ahead and highlight different ranges. Control key allows you to do a lot of different various things. All right. Let's do one more formatting thing that you're probably already familiar with, but I think is very, very useful. We've only got six rows right here, or technically 7 rows. And then we've only got a few columns of information. Is that the way all spreadsheets are? There are only 6 rows? No, so Microsoft Excel currently has a limitation of 1,000,000 rows. I remember when they actually made the change, it was in the mid-2000s. It used to be a limit of 10,000 rows. I will tell you, you probably don't want to go too far beyond 10,000 rows because Excel tends to struggle once you get past 10,000 rows. It really struggles with a lot of data. That's where you want another data analysis tool that can work more quickly. But we could technically have thousands of rows here and be fine. We could have hundreds of columns. I think it goes, I don't remember what the exact range is, but I think it's 256 columns. I could be wrong about that. I didn't do the exact counting, but it goes out to when you actually go well beyond the alphabet starts repeating itself, A, B, A, C, A, D, then B, and all that. You can see that. We could actually have a lot of range here. So the problem is that if I scroll down, I lose my header. If I scroll to the too far to the right, I lose all the information that's kind of the basis, like the student names. So let's say I want to freeze my spreadsheet to contain that information. That's where we're going to use something called freeze panes, which I'm going to try to get this thing out of the way so I can look at it. So click over on view, and you will find this tool called freeze panes. Now, there are a few things that we're going to do with freeze panes to show you its utility. First one is I'm going to actually freeze the top row. By doing that, I want to click on row 2. And I just want to go to freeze panes, and you can say freeze top row is the first thing we can do. We could also do freeze first column, or we can do a custom freeze, which is what I want to do here. We'll see why in just a second. So freeze panes, and now my first row is frozen. So I can scroll up and down and maintain that. But let's go ahead and unfreeze panes. Let's do another one. Let's say that I want to keep my first 3 columns because I want the banner ID, last name, and first name. Unfortunately, freeze row or freeze first column won't help us here. So in this case, we want to click on column D, and we want to click on freeze panes again. And now you will notice that we can click over to the right, and it will maintain those first 3 columns. All right, now for the master stroke. This will be the one that really impresses people when you do it, because you have people that you work with that don't know how to use Excel. There are so many simple little tricks that you can do. They'll be like, that is so cool. Do not tell them the secrets, okay? Do not tell them the secrets. This is like Fight Club. Don't talk about Fight Club. It's a really old reference. Sorry, it's a really bad reference. So don't tell people the secrets. If they don't know, you want them to feel like that you know so much more than they do. You know these complicated tasks and it's not that hard. So don't tell them the secrets. So can we freeze both the first row and the first 3 columns simultaneously? Obviously we can. I wouldn't tell you this secret otherwise. So let's go ahead and click on cell D2 right here, which is the intersection of where we're going to do that freeze. And then we're just going to freeze panes. And voila, we've now got the top row frozen, the first 3 columns frozen as well. When you do that, that will actually throw people for a loop. And unless people are in this class, it won't actually surprise anybody at Truman State because everybody knows how to do the trick. But anybody outside of Truman State will be, wow, that's cool. We're gonna do another one that shows, wow, that's cool here in just a second. So, all right. So let's do one other thing. You'll notice that sheet number 2 has no data in it. Now, we don't need this sheet. I actually deliberately included a blank sheet so we could talk about deleting it. All right. So what I want you to do is I want you to click over on the sheet and just hit the delete key. We're done, right? Actually, if you manage to make that work, that's really impressive because that's not the way it works. Okay. So there's different categories of deletion that exist in Excel, and you need to be aware of all of them. So what I want you to do is in 1, 2, and 3, A1, A2, and 3, just type in some random information. I'm going to type in 1, 2, and 3. All right. So I want to talk about the different methods of deletion. By the way, I want to zoom in a little bit so I can see this here. There's a couple ways you can zoom, which are kind of neat. So you can actually use the bar to zoom in right here, which is fine. I'm going to zoom to 200. Does anybody know the shortcut for zooming? So you notice on your mouse, you got this, I'm going to hold it up to the side. You got this little mouse in the middle of the mouse key right here. It's a little trackball. What I want you to do is I want you to put your cursor right in the middle of the text, and I want you to hold down the control key, then move your mouse back and forth, and you can actually zoom that way as well. Which I don't know that saves any time, but it's just cool, okay? Again, one of those cool tricks in that. So now learn something here. So let's talk about the different levels of deletion, all right? So the first one is going to be the delete key, what the delete key actually shows. So the delete key will actually delete data, but will not change the context of the spreadsheet. So if I highlight cells 1, 2, and 3, and I hit delete, it will delete the data, but it won't actually delete those rows. Which is very useful if I want to delete data from a spreadsheet. Now, what if I want to delete a row or a column, okay? What if I want to delete a row or a column? So let's say I want to delete row 2. I want to just eliminate the row from the entire spreadsheet. Now, if I hit delete, it will delete the data, but will not get rid of the row. It will not get rid of the row. So this is where we actually have to go a little step above. Now, the easiest way to go about this is to right-click, and then you're going to hit delete. You're going to say, how is this different, Dr. Barnes? When you specify it through this, you're not saying delete data. You're saying delete the highlighted elements, delete the row. So that's what I'm going to do, and you will notice that it completely eliminates the row and moves the rest of the row up. So that's a little bit of a different deletion level. They seem like they're similar things, but again, it's important to tell the difference between deleting text or deleting information and deleting the actual content of the file. The third one down here, if we need to delete the entire table, we need to right-click, and we're going to select delete, and this is going to delete the entire tab. Now, make a note of this. If you have data in it, it's going to give you a warning, and that's a good thing. That is a good thing. That will tell you, hey, are you really certain you want to do this? And I will tell you personally, I have said, yes, I know what I'm doing, shut up, and then I've deleted a tab that I did not want to delete, okay? So whenever you see this warning, stop and think about it. Don't make my mistakes. I say mistakes, and I've done this more than once. Don't make my mistakes here. Make sure that you don't delete the entire tab. But in this case, I'm 100% certain we do not need this tab because I created this spreadsheet, so we can go ahead and delete it. So those are different levels of deletion that we can actually be aware of. Last thing we're going to do, you will notice here that we've got some good performers, like this Michael Barnes guy is actually pretty good. He's one of the top performers, along with this Kathy Otero. Then we got some laggards in the class, some people who are just not taking the course very seriously. And I want to set up a rule for myself that will flag any of my students that don't seem to be performing at a certain level. So we'll say there's 35 points in the class, so I want to actually flag anybody who's got less than 20 points, because that's right around failing level. So let's talk about how to do that, because this is, again, one of those tricks that if you know how to do, it's not really all that impressive once you start learning how to do them, but other people will look at it and say it's really cool. You're probably familiar with this. This is going to be a conditional formatting task, okay? So that's not data, that's data validation. Sorry, we'll talk about that later. So let's go ahead and go over conditional formatting. And let's just set up a new rule. So I want to say format values that are above or below a certain average, okay? And I want to say, so, sorry, no, so my apologies. Toppers, cells, guys, no. I should have looked this up before I went to class. My sincere apologies. Sorry, my apologies. Format all these cells that contain. That's always embarrassing when I forget what I'm doing here. All right. So let's go ahead and say cell value less than, and I'm going to say just 20. And I'm going to format that. I'm just going to say, I'm going to do a fill, very simple fill. I'm going to make the fill red if that format is less than 20. So again, fill value less than 20. And then when it says format, we're just going to change that yellow highlight to a red highlight. So you can actually click on fill and do that. Okay, now you will notice that I just did this for the first cell, and this is not below 20. But hopefully, if I did this correctly, if I auto key in a hard number that's below 20, so I can type 15, the conditional formatting should kick in. Also, conditional formatting is not it follows the same relative cell references. So if I flash fill this down, now the conditional formatting will not change the formulas, but it will actually change the formatting for those cells. So my low performer here is now highlighted and flagged, and I may have to have a conversation, okay? Which unfortunately, this student is not on campus today, so I can't talk to them. I might have tried earlier today, so. All right, any questions on this? Anything that I went through a little bit too quickly or went fast? Again, pretty basic stuff, pretty straightforward stuff. The goal here is not to rehash things that you've already done. If you've already know how to do this or you do it a different way, that's absolutely fine. It's more to understand the philosophy. I promise they do get a little bit more challenging from this point, but we got to start out small and move up from here. Hopefully it reiterated something that you don't remember or you learned something new today. And if you didn't, again, I'll step up my game in the future. Well, the last thing we need to talk about is we need to talk about homeworks, because that's a homework assignment. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go through the homework assignment, talk about some of the concepts here and what the answers are. If you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand, stop me. But let's just go ahead and jump in right here. By the way, I may modify the homework assignments beforehand. I did notice that somebody had already started working on chapter 3 assignments. I will try to update you if I change anything in the homework assignments. I don't plan on doing that in the near future. I did have some homework questions that I drew over from last semester that I wasn't particularly happy about, so I may make some small changes, but they will not be massive changes. So there may only be 1 or 2 questions. All right, accounting information systems, AIS, this entire course, are they always computerized? No, they're not, because remember, accounting information systems contain not only computerized elements, software, and hardware, but they contain people, okay? So we can actually have a people-based accounting information system. In fact, if you think about it, accounting information systems existed well before computers did. It may not have been as clean or as straightforward, but computers, while a big element of modern accounting information systems, they were not exclusive to that. We can actually have a system that doesn't contain intercomputerized elements. Report only financial related information. Are we gonna have accounting information system with just financial information? No, we talked a little bit about that, I think, in chapter 1, especially in this day and age where companies are starting to move away from just reporting on monetary basis and financial basis. There's going to be information that has to be contained, such as ESG information, environmental, social, and governance information, which are not exclusively financial in nature. So that's not true. Our information system that records processes and reports on transactions will provide financial and non-financial information for decision-making and control. Well, that's the longest definition, so it must be the correct one, right? Yeah, it is the correct one, okay? It's very good, very, very relevant approach for that definition. Require a CITP designation to understand. Did anybody see this question and say, what's a CITP? And Google that. If you don't do that, that's a good habit to get into. That's a life habit, not just for this course. That's just a good life habit. If you see something you don't understand, what is that? Wikipedia is my best friend. I donate frequently because I spend like hours on Wikipedia a week just looking up information. CITV, Certified Information Technology Professional. That's what actually that stands for. And that will not be a question on the exams for your benefit, what that means. So C is our answer. Going down to 4. The correct order of events in the value chain is technically all of the above, because this is the correct order. It doesn't actually say the specific sequence, but let's just go ahead and make sure we understand that. Again, I told you that that's something you should be aware of. Oops, wrong set of slides. So let's just go ahead and take a quick look because we actually have the slides right here. So inbound logistics, operations, outbound logistics, marketing and service. That's the sequence we're concerned about. This is the, oops. These are the primary areas of the value, primary activities of the value chain. These take place kind of after the fact, but they're all relevant to the firm value chain and the AIS, how it presents those. So we would say inbound logistics, operations, outbound, then marketing and sales, and service take place after that. So our answer that we're looking for in here is actually going to be C. But if you answered any of the questions, those are all actually correct sequences. So note that need to worrisome about that. A supply chain. All right. How many people answered A? Be honest. Supplies jewelry chains. Isn't that just crazy? It's a supply chain. Okay. It's just, the way it works. Sometimes they do jokes like that in the book, and I do find them funny, even though I don't think the questions are all that great sometimes, but I enjoyed that one. Refers to the flow of materials, information, payments, and services. That's actually our answer. Okay, that's what to define a supply chain. You could have answered C, similar in function and purpose to the value chain, and that's close to correct. I think B is a better answer, but if you answered C, I would accept that if I gave that on the exam, if I said something like that and didn't give you a B as an answer. This is the more correct answer, but this is still technically correct. Does not apply to a service firm like an accounting firm. Can an accounting firm still have supply chain? Can we supply things that are not physical resources? Absolutely, absolutely. Back to, we talked about human resources. We were just talking about that earlier today. Human resources are still resources, though they definitely have more prominence than physical or tangible resources. All right, moving on. Question number 7. Customer relation management software does not include information about what? So I threw this question on here and said it's too easy, but I still wanted to ask it if anybody's second guessing themselves. Probably going to have information about customers, probably not information about things that are not customers. So there's only one thing up here that's not a customer. That's current employees. All right. Moving on to number 10. The balance sheet account most likely affected by an AIS investment in supply chain management software would be what? We talked about this at the end of chapter 1 lecture, but remember we looked at the income statement and I said, what are the elements that are affected in the income statement by different areas of the AIS? And so we talked about supply chain. Supply chain is relates to procurement, relates to acquiring the goods and services, or the goods and services we need to actually provide our own goods and services. So what did you guys call that in 221? What was that line item that actually related to purchasing and procurement? The cost of goods sold? Yeah, so the cost of goods sold. So that would be something that would be very relevant. So that's not asking what's in this question, but it's cost of goods sold in the income statement. What is the kind of the analog to cost of goods sold in the balance sheet? What is that account called? What did you guys, 221 was all about calculating, or at least the first part of 220 was all about calculating what the value is for a specific balance sheet account, okay? You had 3 different designations for it. It was a big, long thing and probably gave you a headache, but what was that account called? And there was silence met in the room. I'll give you a hint, starts with the letter I. Yeah, I'll give you a hint, starts with the letters I-N. Inventory, yeah, it's all about inventory. Cost of goods sold is generally going to be about the calculation of inventory. Cost of goods sold went to that inventory assignment. You had to actually learn that at the beginning of the course, and it was really, really long and tedious, but that's an important distinction to make. It's going to be most affected by inventory because that's about how we acquire inventory for our work. All right, well, let's move on to 14, a very similar question. Customer relation management software most likely to affect which income statement account? What do we generally do with customers? Do we acquire goods and services from customers? Or do we provide customer goods with goods and services? What do we call it when we provide somebody with goods and services? What is that type of a transaction called? A sales transaction, a revenue transaction. So we're probably very interested in that. So we're going to be revenues here. Now, does that mean that other transaction areas would not be affected? Not at all. But again, this question says most likely to be affected. Generally, we're going to have those customers. They're going to have sales. So it's going to affect our revenues. All right. An auditor testing internal controls would generally be considered to fill which role with respect to AISs? Remember, auditors are independent evaluators. They evaluate that. That's actually from the slides. We actually have a slide that kind of detailed out the different roles. So those right there, and evaluators right next to auditor there. And then, which of the following represents the proper transformation from data to decision according to the information value chain? So keep in mind, you only really need to know the first 2 of these because data gets transformed to information, and there's only one that actually contains that information. Data immediately transformed to information. But if you're still curious about that, that was actually contained in the slides as well. It's a slide that actually shows the transition information. Then we're going to talk a lot about this transition process over the course of the semester, which is why I included this particular question. All right, jumping over to chapter 2, let's talk about those multiple choice questions real quick. There's only a few of them. Which of the following is not a role of the accounting function in business? So I want to make a note of this. I think I've already talked about it in this course. Oftentimes when you see all of the above in this particular questions, it's the correct answer. Do not get in the habit of doing that on the exam. I do use all of the above occasionally. I very rarely use all of the above as the correct answer. I would actually say 1 in 4 times that it's the correct answer, which you probably can figure out why, because there are 4 answers. So it's going to be on average 1 of the 4 times. But in this situation, do we use a accounting function for financial close? Yeah. Regulatory compliance, laws and regulations, absolutely. Project management, yep, that's what you learned in 221. Using IT to make financial and accounting processes more efficient, we hope so. That would be a big goal of an accounting function. So all of the above are roles of the accounting function. All right, moving down to question number 6. Which of the following is used to represent a gateway in BPMN? Hopefully you know this because you actually had to do a BPMN diagram. The gateway remembers actually the decision process where we say, we've actually got more than one option. How do we actually parse between those options? That's this diamond right here. This diamond's in part B. The next one says, which is used to represent a sequence flow in BPMN? Now, I want to delineate here, and that's relevant to the next question because I didn't provide very good context for this in my lecture. A sequence flow represents transition of information within a pool or within a lane. A message flow is transition of information outside of a pool, okay? So when you see a sequence flow, that's this unbroken line right here. Why do I mention this now? Because question number 11, which is your last question, actually says, which of the following best describes a message flow? So a message flow is a little bit different from a sequence flow in that it communicates information outside of a pool or to other organizations. Remember, we talked about those dashed lines that actually showed we had the doctor's office and the patient diagram. That's a message flow, and that actually is answered by C. Message flow represents exchanges between pools, which would be transition of information between organizations. That's the answer that you should be looking for. Interestingly enough, you could look at this and you can actually kind of come through a process of elimination of what the answer is, but I wanted to clarify that's what that's looking at because I didn't do a good job explaining that in the lecture. All right, let's move on to our problem question here. So keep in mind, I mentioned this also in lecture, so I asked for your not discussion questions or problems. When you're doing your assignment, make sure that you look and see, is it the discussion question I'm asking for or the problem? If you did the discussion question on this one, I'm not going to count off, okay? I'm mostly just concerned about completion. But I specifically did ask for problem answer on this one. So this is going to be match the value chain activity in the left column with the scenario in the right column. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. So service activities. Service activities, again, take place at the end of the value chain. That's after the customer has already received their product, and we have to provide follow-up work for them. So which of the one would be most appropriate to that? What do you guys think about warranty work? That seem reasonable? Has anybody ever bought a piece of machinery, like a computer or a device that goes in the home and had to take it for warranty work? That's kind of a common process that happens because it stops working and you've got it under warranty. Hopefully you get a good warranty for your car when you go first purchase one, because that takes away a lot of the expense. So service activities is B. I have to go with these a lot faster, otherwise I'm gonna run out of time. I apologize. Inbound logistics, that's where we acquire the materials that we need in order to actually prepare our goods and services. So that would make sense that we're going to do the receiving dock for raw materials. So F. Marketing and sales activities. Marketing sales activities, that's actually where we can communicate to our customers so they can actually make decisions about whether or not to buy our product. So surveys for prospective customers. A. Firm infrastructure. What do we say about firm infrastructure? That's basically everything that supports the organization, its operations. Easiest way to look at that is the CEO and CFO, which fortunately enough is listed as one of the options here. G. Human resource management. Human resource management, that's actually acquiring those resources that we actually need to actually produce items. So worker recruitment down at I. Technology, well, technology is just it sounds. We want to actually evolve over time. If you don't evolve, you die, okay? There's very few organizations that have the same products now that they had 50 years ago. So technology would be like new product developments. That's E. Procurement and purchasing, they're synonymous terms. So we're acquiring goods that we actually need. So what are we actually going to be doing for procurement? Buying and sourcing raw materials. Now note, this is different from the actual delivery of these raw materials. The inbound logistics would be the delivery of those items, the receiving of those raw materials. Procurement is actually on the purchasing, so the initial acquisition of those. Outbound logistics, that's where we get it to the customer. So it's D, deliver to the first customer. And then operations, that's where we're actually doing the work. We're talking about manufacturing environment. We probably have an assembly line associated with that. So C. Let's do it one more time because I looked at the riveting stares in your eyes and everybody was just enamored by everything I was talking about there. So I'm going to do another one just for you guys, All right. So this one's actually starting out with the activity. We're moving to the value chain items. So there's a lot of, by the way, there's a lot of these that just go immediately across. That was not an accident, I guess. But so a customer call center. But why would we have a customer call center? If there's a problem after the fact, all right? So what is the very tail end of the value chain? Is that service activities? Okay, so that's what we're going to say. We're going to go to. We're going to cheat. Supply schedules. This is where we're going to be receiving our goods. It sounds a lot like inbound logistics. That's our first one that's going straight across. All right. Order taking. That's where customers contact us and say, this is where we would like to purchase from you. So customers are generally involved in what's process, that sales process. So we're going to say marketing and sales down here. All right. Accounting department, why do we need accountants? Excellent question. The answer is we don't, and I don't have a job, so I probably better get a good answer for this. So accounting is a support feature, right? And what do we call support features of organizations? What was that I word that we talked about? Infrastructure? So firm infrastructure. So we're gonna go right straight across. All right. Staff training. Staff training is the people, the resources, the organization that prepare the goods and services. So that's human resources. So we're going to go across again. Research and development, that's for technology purposes. So we're going to cross again. So 4, 5, and 6 go immediately across to D, E, and F, which makes things simple. All right. Verifying quality of raw materials. So again, remember, that's the point that we're receiving the materials. It's a little bit, it's not the process of receiving the materials, but the acquisition and making sure that what we're acquiring is of sufficient quality. So that'd be procurement. So C. Distribution center would be getting things out to our customers. So that's taking it from our goods or from our warehouse and getting it to their hands. That's not inbound, but it's outbound logistics. Okay, so 8 goes to H. Then finally, manufacturing. From being these manufacturing organizations, that's their operation. That's what they do. That's the work that they do. So 9 goes all the way up here to A right there. By the way, I didn't do this easily. I didn't like write letters next to it. I actually decided to draw lines so you can actually see my answer. So I got like the lines drawn up here. So yeah, that's I tried to make things simple, but then I made it really complicated because it's really hard to see what line goes to where. So I'm just proud of myself. I was able to decipher my own scroll. All right, last question. I want you guys to do a BPMN diagram. So I'm going to jump over here into my own solution if I can find it. There we go. Chapter 1, Chapter 2, homework solutions. So I'll show you exactly. I did this by computer, so you can kind of see my scroll right here. Yeah. Hopefully you enjoy that. That's how I know the little lines are drawn. All right. So let's go ahead and I just, again, this is not graded on accuracy. So if you don't have the exact same answer, do not panic. Okay. This was a first attempt and it should have been a pretty simple attempt, but I want to actually make sure that we're clear on why we have certain items that occur at certain points. I think that you could have consolidated many of these activities into a single activity, or you could have split them out into multiple activities. However you approach it, it's fine. I'm not concerned that your diagram exactly matches this one, but that the intuition you use to prepare your diagram is sound and consistent. And by the way, that's what I will grade on when we do this on exams. And we will do this on exams, by the way. So it says Larry woke up to his alarm clock buzz. So that's our origination event. That's our beginning event. That's where we start out, because you wake up to the alarm clock, or if you're like me, you hit snooze like about a dozen times. All right. So got up and dressed for the day. So that's our first activity, getting up and getting dressed. Then ate a hearty breakfast of oatmeal, toast, and orange juice and coffee. So he says eat breakfast. If you actually listed out the items that were listed as a hearty breakfast, kudos to you, okay? More patience than I have. Grabbed his books and prepared to leave for school, all right? So we've got 3 preliminary activities that are all pretty consistent. Again, you could have merged these into a single activity because this is all part of a morning routine. You could have even just said activity, morning preparation. That's all fine. So then we know Larry actually has an activity and checks the weather, takes the time to check the weather. I do that too. I pull out my phone and I've got a weather app and I say, is it going to rain today? Which doesn't matter because I always carry my umbrella, but I'm still curious. Larry, on the other hand, says it's going to rain. If rain is likely, he's got different steps from if it's not likely. So this is where we have a decision point. This is where we have a different set of different set of activities depending on what is going to be the criteria. So if rain's going to happen, if rain is likely, Larry says, all right, I want to have a jacket and umbrella, and I'm also going to drive to school. And then park, if you've got a car, you've got to park and walk to class. And by the way, this is split out, so you had to read it. So yeah, get a jacket and umbrella, drove to school, and then he had to jump down here. If he drove to school, he parks the car and walked to class. He walks to school, he goes straight to class. So we actually had to note this separate activity of parking the car and walking to class, where we could skip that step down here. Now, if it's not raining, Larry just basically says, I don't need my jacket and my umbrella, I'm just heading to class. And you could have technically just done this in one activity. You could just say, all right, you don't need to say skip jacket and umbrella because it's not an activity you have to know. Like, that's not something you have to go stand in front of your closet and say, I don't need my jacket and umbrella. You could have just said no activity whatsoever there and just walk straight to class. That's all there was to it. But again, we have to close the gateway, which I do think is an important step that the book tends to skip later on in the semester. And then once we do, we finish the process because we're in class and that's our goal. That's what we're trying to get to. So that was all that you really had to do for this. The most important elements are identifying the activities, and then probably the most important is that gateway, that decision point, because those do change the activities that you're going to follow. Now, I want to make a joke about this because I've seen many people who are out walking in the rain, just like in their same clothes that they walked out when they were just normally. So a lot of college students, obviously nobody in this room, but a lot of college students would not have a decision gateway right here. They would say, all right, raining, I'm going to go out and take the same activities. I'm going to walk to Click campus, no umbrella, no coat. I'm too tough for that, but in this situation, this would kind of be the more logical situation. If it rains, then we actually change our activity process. So think about this as kind of an analogy moving forward. When we start implementing decision gateways, what we're trying to identify is, do our activities change as our decisions change? So our activities change, our decisions change, or circumstances change is probably a better way to say it. If it's raining, yes, we have different activities than if it's not raining. And so that's what this is meant to do. All right, that is it for today. We will start chapter 3 on Monday. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you guys in a few days.